Well, good evening, everybody. This is meteorologist Andrew Panero. It's pretty quiet, it's nice and calm, and it's cool out right now. And we're going to be seeing fairly nice conditions for the next few days going into the weekends as well. It's quite a stark contrast, though, the weather here versus the weather that's going on in the tropics. So we have three systems right now. We have Hurricane Irma, Category 5, devastating, catastrophic, where it's going to make landfall, and it looks like it's setting its sights on Florida. Right on Irma's heels is Hurricane Jose, which is now a major hurricane, a Category 3 hurricane. And we also have Hurricane Katia. Katia is in the Gulf of Mexico. It's not really going to be making any effect with the U.S. It's going to be heading more southwest into Mexico. But even if it's not going to make an effect in the U.S., it's still rare to have these three systems in the same Atlantic basin at the same time. Two major hurricanes and one regular hurricane. Regular hurricane just meaning Category 1 or 2, but still, a hurricane's nothing really to laugh at. But we do have some interesting things to talk to. So, let's head to the studio right now. Well, back in the studio now, so I want to start just a little sit-down discussion here. Going to change over now to the computer screen, and starting with the National Hurricane Center page. It's showing these three systems in the area. So Irma formed first. That's the big player. That's 175 mile per hour winds as of 5 p.m. this evening. Then right on its heels, Hurricane Jose is now a Category 3 hurricane, still a major hurricane, 120 mile per hour winds as of the 5 p.m. update. Then what formed right after that was Katia. Katia is a Category 1 with 80 mile per hour winds. Now each of these are going to be kind of playing different factors. I'm going to start with the lowest and work its way up. So Katia, let me click here. This is showing the projected path. It's not going to be affecting the U.S. This is showing it's going to be moving southwest, pretty much right into the middle part of Mexico. It's not going to be affecting directly the mainland U.S., but it's still causing some upper air dynamics with the other two. The upper air dynamics are kind of all mixing together, kind of forcing Irma to go into some areas that we may not want Irma to go into. So that's Katia. Then moving up the line here, Jose. This is the path for Jose right now. It's looking like it's going to be pretty much staying in the Atlantic until about Tuesday, but it's not going to just dissipate by that point. It's still going to be there. So it's still going to be a hurricane by, according to this forecast, by 2 p.m. on Tuesday, but that's not just the end of it. That's still going to be lasting, and there are some interesting things the forecast models are doing with Jose that are kind of interesting to look at, but I won't go too far in detail with that just because when you get very far out in the forecast models, they do get very wild in what they're saying. So this is Jose, and now the big player, Irma. So Irma has already caused a lot of devastation and catastrophe in a lot of these islands. Barbuda, I believe, is the name of that island. It's pretty much just leveled. That was one of the islands, I believe, that just went entirely through the eye of Irma. And the eye of Irma entirely encapsulated this island. That was something I've never seen before, but this is also the most powerful hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean, so it's something that we're not going to be seeing that often, and hopefully we will not see this for a very long time, because there's going to be a lot of devastation with it. So this, again, is a cone with the National Hurricane Center. It's not an exact path. You don't want to go right down the middle. As it gets wider, this is where it becomes a little bit more uncertain. The only kind of chilling thing right now is once it gets out of the Caribbean, this northerly turn, this is heading, looks like right over Florida, pretty much right down Main Street if you don't mind that, but this is going to be going right over Florida, and some of the forecast models are showing a couple of different things that I'll show you. But first, it's very interesting also to take a look at the satellite image. So right now, this is the satellite image showing both Katia in the Gulf of Mexico and Irma in the Caribbean. Katia's not really formed too well, but it's still a Category 1 hurricane. And you can also see what's being this outflow, the clockwise rotation in the upper atmosphere of the hurricane is being sucked up by the just general low pressure system that's kind of in our vicinity in the Northeast. That's where you see this very long strip of clouds coming from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up the East Coast, going even into Canada, then wrapping around Canada. We're in this kind of gap right now where there's some spots of just nice clear skies, and it looked pretty nice outside and it felt nice outside when I was just there, but we have calm here, but it's very devastating in other parts of the world. This is what I want, something I really like with the meteorology is just showing such dynamic weather throughout the entire world. So also with Irma, if you look at this eye right here, this is a perfectly formed kind of textbook style hurricane that I studied in college. And it's showing almost a perfect circle there. You saw a little bit of wobbling right there, but that's kind of what's called an eye wall replacement cycle. That's what it looked like, and it didn't really dissipate as much as we would see in a typical hurricane with this eye wall replacement cycle. But after that tiny little wobbling there, it just picked right back up and formed to almost a perfect circle again. And you can see how healthy this hurricane is too. Typically with low pressure systems in the northern hemisphere, they spin counterclockwise in the lower levels of the atmosphere, and they spin clockwise in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And you can see both of these rotations. So the main rotation is this counterclockwise rotation around the eye. But some of these higher, thinner clouds on a satellite image are showing this clockwise rotation. That's how you know this is a very healthy and very vigorous hurricane. Comparing that to Katia, there's a little bit of counterclockwise rotation. There's not really much what's called outflow, that regular clockwise rotation, but it's being any kind of clockwise rotation in the upper levels is being kind of pulled by this front that's in our area in the Northeast. So again, we have counterclockwise rotation in the lower levels, clockwise rotation in the upper levels. And then not showing in this satellite image, but right behind Irma is Jose. And it's very close. And something interesting too. So we have these 3 hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin right now, and 2 of them are major. One of them is a Category 1. This has happened before. I want to show you this image here. So at the very top, this is pretty much today. Irma's in the middle, Jose is right on its heels, and Katia's in the Gulf of Mexico. Now let's go back 7 years. September 16th, 2010, this image is from. The big hurricane then was Igor, also I, Julia on Igor's heels, which was J, and then K is Carl that formed in the Gulf of Mexico. And these 3 are almost in the exact same positions as they were 7 years ago in the exact same part of the alphabet, J or I, J, and K. And they also formed in the same order with the biggest hurricane in the middle, I, the second biggest right on the middle one's heels, J, Jose and Julia, and then the one that formed after that in the Gulf of Mexico, not so impressive, was K with Katia now and Carl back in 2010. So it's very interesting to see these 3 hurricanes from 2010 compared to 2017 in almost the exact same spot. This is something I've never really seen before in all the forecasting I've been doing. So now let's dig in with the forecast models. So the first one I want to show you is the GFS. With the GFS here, this one is showing it's going to go right kind of in between the Atlantic, between Cuba and some of the northern islands in the Caribbean like the Bahamas. Right in between those, then it's going to go right up the east coast of Florida. Then once it hits into Georgia and enters into Georgia, it starts to dissipate and fall apart, but it still is going to be a pretty strong hurricane by the time it gets to Georgia. Then Jose does something kind of interesting once we get past that. So now this is looking like this coming Wednesday. This is pretty much gone with Irma, but Jose is still just sitting there and just spinning about in the Atlantic Ocean. That H right here, the high pressure, that's the subtropical high. It's kind of pushing Jose right there down. But once that starts to move, Jose does this kind of interesting thing and kind of heads near our way. But this is one forecast model, so I'm not going to put too much credit to this right now. We're just going to focus back here with Irma. So this is showing right up the eastern coast of the peninsula of Florida there. And it's going to be a very devastating and catastrophic hurricane. So that's the GFS. Now let's take a look at the NAM. And the NAM is pretty much in agreement. You also see how it looks much smoother. The NAM is a higher resolution model. So this is showing 12 kilometers. A lot of the science stuff is in the metric system. So just ignore the kilometers part. Just think of the number 12. That's the resolution of this. The GFS resolution is 100. So bigger pixel. It's going to be a little bit blurry and a little bit blockier. So that's why it looked like it was jumping a bit more than the NAM here. But still with the NAM, it's going pretty much the exact same position as the GFS. It's following right up the eastern coast of the peninsula of Florida and sitting the eye wall, which is the most dangerous part of the hurricane, right on the coast. Still, when you take a look at it, let me see if I could zoom in here. So if you split the eye wall into quadrants, 4 quadrants, we have the top left, top right, top left, bottom left. The most devastating part is the front or top right quadrant because the storm's moving forward and it's kind of amplifying the wind flow around the counterclockwise rotation of the center of the low at the surface. So although the eye wall is still all dangerous, the most dangerous part on this forecast model and the GFS was not really making landfall, but still, this is a major catastrophic hurricane, so it doesn't matter what part of the eye wall you're in. This is still going to be a dangerous storm as it approaches Florida. There are mandatory evacuations in parts, and a lot of people are trying to get out. It's already chaos down there, too. A lot of the gas stations are just running out of gas. The grocery stores running out of food, running out of water. So this is the NAM. Next, let's take a look at the European model. So with the European model here, it's going very similar. It's kind of putting the center kind of right through the middle part of the Atlantic or the Caribbean area there, between Cuba and the northern islands right around the Bahamas. But it doesn't take it exactly the same way as the GFS and the NAM, the 2 American models there. So this one, when I play, this is actually going up the western coastline of the peninsula of Florida, but still taking it right into Georgia, but then going a little bit into some other states there, but once it hits landfall, it's pretty much just dying out. But it's interesting to see it go right up the west coast of Florida with the European model there. This one doesn't go out as far, but it also just kind of keeps Jose kind of planted right in the Atlantic Ocean there, not really spinning. It doesn't go out as far as the GFS, so can't really see if the GFS's kind of wild speculation there may come true or not. But we'll see within the coming weeks. The next one I want to show you is the Canadian model. So this one, and it's very interesting because this one also has it go right up the east coast there. Also the same exact spot going between the Atlantic Ocean, between Cuba and those northern Caribbean islands. Then it makes landfall right around Miami and just follows right up the east coast of the peninsula of Florida. And then just heads right into Georgia, South Carolina, and even a little bit into North Carolina before it just falls apart there. So that's the Canadian. The last one I want to show you is a model from IBM called the WSI model. And this is a specific trial run called Deep Thunder. You might research that or have heard of IBM's Deep Thunder with the Watson supercomputer. This is a forecast model that's directly coming from the Watson supercomputer. So this one, I'm just going to hit the play button here and just watch what happens. So this is taking the low pressure also kind of right between the water from Cuba to those northern Caribbean islands. Then it makes landfall kind of right at Miami and also follows right up the east coast. Then goes back out into the ocean a little bit, then makes landfall in South Carolina, not really Georgia, and then it just dissipates as it heads a little bit more inland. And with Jose, it also kind of just keeps it sitting there spinning in the Atlantic Ocean. So all of these forecast models are showing a very tight window or a tight agreement, and a lot of them are showing the exact same result. So let me switch back now to the main camera. So basically what I'm saying is there's very high confidence now that this is going to be a devastating and catastrophic hurricane when it makes landfall in Florida. I'm fairly confident. I'm getting up there to like 88, 89, or 90% confident it's going to make landfall somewhere in Florida. There's still a little bit of wiggle room once it starts to make its way through those northern Caribbean islands that get a little bit off, where it could maybe go up the west coast of the peninsula of Florida or just head straight for Georgia or South Carolina. But most of these model runs, and you might have seen also something called the spaghetti plots. All of these are just like lots and lots of model runs that are all kind of agreeing right on this, right up the east coast of the peninsula of Florida. So this is going to be a very devastating hurricane. If you are in Florida and you're watching this from Florida, get out now. This is bad. This is going to be very bad. This is one of those situations where I'm not just saying this just to kind of like rile everybody up. This is really going to be a devastating hurricane. And it's already devastating in the Caribbean. Again, one of those islands, Barbuda, I believe if I'm pronouncing that right, is already leveled. There's almost all the infrastructure of that island is just flattened. And it looks like Jose is going to go right over the same spot. Kind of like if Irma didn't flatten enough, Jose is going to kind of wipe it clean of anything else on there. So I feel really bad for those people. It's going to be very devastating there. Jose, not so much into Florida, but Irma. Irma is going to be very devastating in Florida. So I'm going to keep you guys updated with these tropical updates with Irma and tropical updates throughout the rest of the hurricane season this year. But Irma is what we're focusing on now. If you do know anybody down in Florida, please let them know to get out if they can. Try and get them out and stay with you or stay with somebody else that's not in that general vicinity, from Florida to South Carolina. So even though this is kind of a downer, like really dark looking forecast, I really had to get this out there, and I really had to just have a sit down discussion with you guys about the most powerful hurricane ever in the Atlantic Ocean. So again, I'll keep the weather updates coming. This is meteorologist Andrew Pinero. Have a great evening. If you have anybody that you know near Florida, see if you can get them out and just try and help out, and do not go down there at all. Again, have a great evening, everybody, and I'll have more updates coming.